What's going on? I'm Connor Wilson from LaxAllStars.com. Today I'm going to teach you how to string a Trameshional pocket. Ooh, kill him! Welcome to the Trameshional tutorial. It's half mesh, it's half amazing. Let's get started. You're going to want to take a full piece of mesh and attach it to the string, to the stick, using whatever top string method you're most comfortable with. It doesn't really matter how you choose to do it, as long as it's tight up to the top and the mesh is pulled fully across the face of the stick. Make sure that you are also finishing off with these kind of loop knots to make sure that the mesh is really pulled tight to the sidewall. Then to start your sidewall, you're actually going to do the exact same knot. Make sure that that mesh is once again pulled really tight. Go through the same hole, loop it around, you're all set. The next knot you put in down the sidewall is going to be pretty far down the sidewall. You may skip one or two holes, and you're going to go through the outside, through the front of the mesh, and then back around the sidewall, making kind of a little loop right there, which you can then pull down really tight. There are a couple different names for this knot, but you really want to make sure that it's pulling the mesh down really tight without allowing for any bunching. You're going to take your next sidewall and really do the same thing, where you're trying to draw that sidewall down quite far. Again, you're going to do that same knot where you go back through the top of that loop. That creates a little loop knot there. You'll continue to do that all the way down the sidewall. I usually attach 4, maybe 5 mesh holes to the sidewall before I stop. And then I'm just going to do a simple knot, and this is going to be the sidewall for the traditional portion of the stick, which is at the bottom. I'll put in 3 or 4 sidewall loops depending on how many diamonds of traditional I want. In this case I put in 3, so I'm going to have 3 diamonds of traditional below my mesh. Note that I've left the bottom sidewall hole empty on one side. That way I can start my traditional stringing using that bottom hole. On the other side, for me that's the left hand side, I can go all the way down to the bottom. But I've got both sidewalls in, the identical portions are up top where the mesh is, and then down below it doesn't really matter. You can do them symmetrical or asymmetrical depending on your stringing style. Now you want to cut the mesh. So I've identified that last attached row is the row that I'm going to use. So right below that, actually a little bit below that, leaving kind of as much mesh as possible before the next row, I'm going to make my cuts. So I'm going to work my way slowly across the mesh, making sure that I'm cutting on a straight line and leaving as much as possible while still cutting off the next diamond that I'm not going to use. Once I've got that done, you can see the line is straight across and it runs even with that last attached mesh row. I do need to take a lighter and burn the bottom of the mesh, otherwise it will fray and eventually your traditional pocket will actually rip through the mesh. This is very important to make sure that your pocket's going to have staying power. If it catches on fire, blow it out. It's pretty simple. So those are all done. Now I'm going to go not in the first mesh row that's actually connected, but that next mesh row over. And I'm going to take a relatively long piece of string which has been doubled up and attach that to that second mesh row in. Do that by creating a loop, putting that through the mesh hole, and then taking the 2 strings and going back through the loop. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but you just want to make sure that you've got something that you're going to be able to run string through later on. Then I'll feed this runner back through the bottom, as I usually do, and pull it down pretty tight. You can see this process again. Now I'm going to the 4th mesh hole from the side, and this is true whether you cut on a 10 diamond or a 9 diamond row. It actually doesn't really matter that much. As long as you go 2 diamonds in on the first runner and 4 diamonds in on the second runner, you'll be fine. So take that loop and push it through the mesh hole, and I'm going to make sure that it's sitting the right way, that the tension is correct. Kind of stuff is always important in a traditionally strung pocket. It's pretty solid. Now I can take the bottoms of this runner and run them back up through the bottom of the stick. So I've done this on the second hole in and the fourth hole in on both sides. So this is across a 10 diamond row, so I have 2 diamonds in the middle. If you did it across a 9 diamond row, you would have 1 diamond in the middle. Now I'm going to take that piece of cross lace. This can be shorter, probably 6 to 7 feet will be more than enough. And just pull that through the bottom hole just a little bit, put a knot in it. And I'm also going to tie off my runners in the front. Now this creates a very tight set of runners, which is good for kind of keeping your knots and stringing organized while you're putting this pocket in. We'll loosen them up later. At the same time, it's important to note that you want to put in a loose traditional pocket. The weaving on your traditional knots should be loose. There should be plenty of slack in that cross lace. I'm not going to go into how you string a traditional pocket, a single string. You can check that out in our other tutorials. But as you can see, it's really the same concept. You're using the runners as you would use leathers. You're just working your way up and down the runner, attaching it with traditional knots. A lot of times I'll tell you to make the sticks taut, make the strings taut. I don't think you want to do that here. You want to leave quite a bit of looseness. When you get to the bottom, you're going to do the same thing as you usually do, or as I usually do. You're going to wrap the string, a piece of cross lace around the runner, and then you're going to tie a little knot there just to kind of keep it in place. As you can see, there's just a little bit of loop there, and we're going to use our runners to actually tie down our cross lace later, and that's the reason that we do this. Now I'm going to start working my way back up the other side onto the next runner. I've got my loops in. I'm going to proceed back to the top, and again I'm using these synthetic runners. In this case it's gray cross lace, but I'm using them like leathers. So that's why you need to have a knot up top that's going to allow you to do this. Now there are a number of different ways to string a Trameshional pocket, and there are TradMesh, and there are all these different names for it. This is just one way, but it's a way that I've found that works pretty well. Now I've worked my way down, I've worked my way back up, and people always ask, hey, where do you finish? You know, what do you do with this piece of cross lace? Instead of tying it off through the top of the sidewall, like you normally would, you just tie it off about halfway up the sidewall, as you normally would. So now my knots are all in place. I'm going to loosen up my runners. You can see it's a really loosely strung pocket, but as I start to kind of push it out a little bit, you can see that a lot of that looseness disappears in the form of knots and a little bit of spacing. So now I'm going to move my knots around. They're all correctly strung and pretty even in terms of tension, but now I can move them around to create an evenly displaced pocket. Push it out again. But now I need to kind of take it to the next level, so I'm going to take a chopstick and put that in along the sidewall wherever I want my pocket to sit, wherever I want the ball to sit. And then I'm going to put it in a tennis ball, as usual. I find that the tennis ball is better. You can pull tension through. It's not the same grippy rubber that a lacrosse ball is. It's got a little more give to it. And now again, I'm going to reorganize my knots, pull them down, make sure that they're all properly spaced and in the right place. Now, they're pretty close. I think this is really important. You really want to pull your runners tight. If you have loose runners, you are probably going to have a whip problem with this variation of TradMesh. So I pull my runners really tight, and then I run them back over the cross lace wherever I can, wherever that lowest knot is on the cross lace. And I use my runners to keep my cross lace in place. One of the big problems you run into with a stick like this is that your cross lace is going to slip. So there you can see I've used my runners. Now I'm going to repeat the process on the outside. But I've used my runners to tie the cross lace down, and then bring the runners back around the front, double knot them nice and tight. That way they're not going anywhere. But really having those runners really tight and using them to hold down the cross lace, that's going to keep your whole pocket in place. Now I'm going to work through just that little bit of excess tension that's left over in the stick. I'm pulling it down through one section. Now I need to pull it back up through that section. And then I'll have to pull it across to this final sidewall section and move the tension all the way down there. Then I'm going to have to repeat that process on the other side. Tension is incredibly important in this pocket. Just, you know, the littlest bit of excess tension can create a very inconsistent stick and one with serious whip problems. So make sure that you have your tension right. Now, even if you do have your tension right, you can run into something like this, which happened to me. Oh no, the ball doesn't come out. You know, you really don't want this. It's taking things too far. And what I did wrong was that I actually pulled this sidewall too tight down on the side. I should have moved that one up a single hole. Now I'm going to have to fix that problem now. It's not the end of the world. It's totally doable. But I made it too tight. I gave it too much of a channel. And now the ball won't come out. So I had to pull that sidewall out. Now I'm going to redo that mesh attachment one hole higher. Again, still making sure it's tied down tight. That's still a point of the pocket, but there was just too much channeling. So now I'm going to run this back through the cross lace, which I put in, and repeat the process of putting in the sidewall, making some slight changes and slight adjustments. So as you can see, I've fixed this right-hand side. You've now got 3 stacked locks where the mesh ends. And here I need to pull out that piece of cross lace and then do it, where you've got the finished product, where you've got 3 stacked knots on either side. Does the ball come out? No, it does. Amazing. Okay, much better. This is a pocket that will actually throw, has all the good properties and none of the bad. So that's, I've now even moved the cross lace finishing knot further up the sidewall, and it's presented no problem. So the sidewall, you can see it's a little bit different than it was, but really contextually it's the same idea. I just had too much tension in that mesh. So there's some balance there. You may have to try things multiple times to really find that sweet spot. Overall, it's a great pocket. You've got a ton of hold, not a lot of whip. I highly recommend it. It's a challenge to string, but if you get it right, I can guarantee you're really going to enjoy it. When it comes to shooting strings, I mean, I'm never a huge shooting string guy, but I find that 1 cotton, 1 nylon is more than enough. Anything more than that, you're going to run into whip problems. Does this bad boy throw? Yeah, it throws just fine. It's got great control, so check it out. Hope you enjoy it. String it up.